I didn't try psychedelics until probably 15 years ago. So in my late 40s, I decided I'd done enough research on the brain. Psychedelics were probably 15 years ago. And there were some studies that were being done, and I was fascinated with what we were learning about the networks in the brain and the circuits in the brain. And so I don't know why I did this, but I was reading a lot about DMT 5-MeO. And that was like my first time back doing a psychedelic. And holy shit, fragmenting my entire physical existence and having 1 billion years of experience in 20 minutes.
Welcome, tribe. I'm Maya Rose.
And I'm Gerald Rogers. We're about to embark on another mind-expanding episode where we dive deep into the realms of psychedelics, sex, and the superconscious.
This is a transformational experience of healing, manifestation, increased clarity, flow, and alignment.
So join us on this sacred journey as we receive the codes of transformation from scientists and psychonauts, shamans, tantra masters, mystics, and more.
Together, we'll unravel the secrets of plant medicine, sex magic, and other tools to tap into higher states of consciousness.
So why are we here? To answer the call, to share our passions, and to be advocates for alternative healing.
So get ready for a ride that transcends the ordinary and leads you to the extraordinary, because living a legendary life is not just a choice.
It's a sacred adventure. As we begin this experience together, I love just imagining that we've just dropped straight into the middle of a ceremony together, and our minds are opened wide, our hearts are fully expanded, and we just get to really tune into the cosmic energy that's flowing through us. And I want to just begin by expressing deep gratitude, John, for who you are and for your presence on the planet and for the just massive global impact that your soul is making because of the stand that you have, I guess, chosen in the world. And one of my favorite things in journey space is actually to just play games, to really play games of consciousness and awareness and just soul level connection. And so would you be open to playing a game with me?
I'll play any game.
Awesome. All right. So here's the game I want to play. I want to play the game of, I call this game Turning Point. So I'm going to invite you to share with me just a moment in time that changed the trajectory of your life, that changed who you were and what you were up to and what you were creating. So just take us to a moment.
I have two moments that just popped into my head like bam, bam. When I was 13 to 17, I didn't do well in school. I hung out with all the other derelicts that didn't do well in school and didn't have a high opinion of themselves, which I didn't at the time. And I got involved in a small little group with 7 guys, and we would go to shops and steal. We would get drugs, do drugs, sell drugs, drink, break in and enter into people's businesses, and we would steal from people. And when I was around 17, 18, I was actually at the airport going from Montreal to Toronto to see my brother. And at the counter was a guy that looked really familiar to me. And so I said, "Hey, Denis." And the guy turned around, and it was this guy that we used to sell drugs to. And my friend who I was with said, "He's a cop. I know who he is." And at that moment, something popped into my head, because he didn't want to have anything to do with me. But something popped in my head. When I was a young boy, my father shared something. He said, even the best juggler in the world will drop what he's juggling once in a while. And the message for me back then from my father is, don't think that you will outsmart, nature, or outsmart, the law, or outsmart, doing what you're doing. And at that moment, I realized that I was doing illegal things. And at that moment, I realized I was probably inches, days, months away from being arrested for selling this guy drugs. And that was a turning point in my life. And that was the point where I said, I have to stop doing what I'm doing. Even though I knew it was wrong at the time, I was doing it to make money, to fit in. That was a turning point like that where I said, that's it, I'm done. And I was done. And then I started looking for another solution for my life. And that's when the second turning point came into play. And my brother, who knew I was getting into a lot of trouble with the law, had talked to one of his friends who he was teaching tennis to. My brother's a tennis pro. And he was in Toronto. I was in Montreal, about 350 miles away. And my brother said, why don't you come for the weekend and take the train, and I'll introduce you to Alan Brown, who's a very successful real estate mogul here in Toronto. I said, yeah, sure, I'll come to see you and we'll have lunch with him. As long as he buys, I'll come. So my brother picks me up at the train station Friday morning around 11 a.m. I meet this man for lunch. My brother drives me there. And at lunch, this guy's asked me, what are some of my goals and dreams? I go, I'd like to make more than $1.65 an hour that I'm making. I'm working in a shipping department in a factory. I'd like to move out of my parents' house, and I would love to buy my own car because I'm really tired of my friends having to pick me up. And he said, well, those are nice goals, but do you have any bigger goals and dreams? And I said, no, I don't. He says, do you watch any shows on TV? Do you read any books? I said, well, the only show I watch is Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. He goes, that's a great show. I love Robin Leach. He said, would you mind answering a few questions for me? And I said, sure. He reached into his briefcase and he pulled out this, I guess, document papers. And he said, would you answer the questions on this in this document? I said, sure, Mr. Brown. And I opened up this document. It was the 1980 Goal Setting Guide. 1980. That just tells you I'm 62 now. But it was 1980 Goal Setting Guide. And I opened up the first page, and the first question was, at what age do you want to retire? And so I looked at him across the table and said, excuse me, Mr. Brown, what am I supposed to put here? I was 17, 18 years old at the time. I was 19 actually at the time. And he said, just pick a number. And I said, is 45 okay? He goes, yeah, that's 26 years from now. You got a long life ahead of you, hopefully. Second question said, how much money do you want to have upon retirement? And then I looked at him, I said, what am I supposed to put here? He says, pick a number. I said, well, but I don't even know how to calculate what I would need upon retirement. We don't know anybody who's retired. He goes, you probably want to put a few $1 million there. I said, is $3 million okay? So I put $3 million. Who do you want to help? I put my mother and my father. I'd love to retire them. What kind of home would you like? What, a 4-bedroom, 2-story house? What kind of car would you like? I wrote Mercedes. Where would you like to travel around the world? I want to travel business class everywhere in the world. What kind of clothes do you want to have? I want to have Italian clothing. And I just wrote out all this stuff that I just made it up. He said, just imagine. So I imagined. And I filled out these questions. He took it and he started reading it. And then he looks at me and he leans in. He said, I want to ask you one question. And the answer to this one question will determine whether you achieve every one of these things. And here I am at 19 thinking to myself, yeah, right. One question is going to determine whether I achieve all of these things. He goes, yep. So he leans in, he says, are you interested in achieving these things and having these things and becoming these things? Or are you committed to achieving them and having them and becoming them? And I'm like, excuse me, Mr. Brown, what's the difference? And he looks me square in the eyes and he says, son, if you're interested, you'll do what's easy and convenient. If you're interested, you'll keep using your stories and excuses. You left high school, grade 11. Your dad's a cab driver. Your mother, is a seamstress. Your father's a gambler. He's an alcoholic. You don't make more than you keep using those stories and reasons and excuses is why you can't. He said, but people who are committed, and this was the game changer. He says, upgrade their identity to match the destiny they want. He says they upgrade their beliefs, they upgrade their values, they upgrade their standards, they upgrade their skills, and yes, they upgrade what they do every single day so that their behavior matches what they want to achieve. And he explains this to me, makes sense to me, leans in, says, so, are you interested or are you committed? I don't know why. I was cocky 19-year-old says, well, in that case, sir, I'm committed. Reaches out his hand. And I put my hand in his. He says, in that case, I will be your mentor. I said, wow, thank you. What's a mentor? That moment, my life changed because he agreed to mentor me, which he explained to me what that was. I moved 5 weeks later from Montreal to Toronto with $50 in my bank account. I borrowed money from my mother, my sister, and my brother because he asked me to go back to school, which I didn't want to do, to become licensed in real estate. I moved in with my brother, slept on a foam mattress, drove my brother's 1973 Dodge Dart to his tennis academy where he taught, to school, then to the office, to go look at homes, to learn how to become a real estate agent. And then Mr. Brown started to educate me on how to upgrade my character, my identity, my beliefs, my habits, and my skills. Game changed.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. Like, it's really fun for me to think of, like, if that moment of time, that conversation, that person had arrived at exactly the right time, how different the trajectory of your life would have been.
Yeah, there's another story too that happened literally 2 years ago. So I haven't seen Mr. Brown since 1982. I left his company, went to another company, then I started my own company. But from 1982 to 2002, I didn't know if he was alive or dead. I tried to reach him to thank him, and I couldn't find him. He wasn't in Toronto anymore. Our office gets a call from somebody in New York, and the call goes like this. Kristen, who's our head of client care, tells me, this man called, said he heard you on some interview talking about this Mr. Brown in Toronto and the story of how he changed your life. And this man on the other line says he thinks you're talking about his father and he wants to speak to you. I'm like, yeah, sure. You know, a lot of people want to speak to me thinking their dad's Mr. Brown. 2 weeks later, he calls back and asks Kristen, did you ask John? Then he says to Kristen, let him know that Lori is my mother. Now I know it's my dad's second wife. And so now I know that this kid is Alan's son. So I call him up. He's studying to be a doctor. And he watched me on this interview, was fascinated with the story about his dad. And he put me in touch with Alan Brown and Lori, who live in Florida now. And I got to get on a call with them on Zoom and thank him personally for helping me literally 40 years earlier.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It just also makes me think of how sometimes, like, we don't know the seeds that we're planting and the ways that our words and our energy will shift other people's lives. That's phenomenal. How did he receive that? Like, seeing the just tremendous impact you've made on the world, the business you built, you know, the ways you've really led such a, I guess, influential life. What was his experience knowing of his role in that?
He remembered my brother. He did not remember the lunch. He knows I worked for him, but he didn't remember the questions he asked me or the documents that he gave me. He was so grateful that I used what he taught me as like a launching pad, you know, for my life. But he was very grateful that I called him and I connected back with him to share the story with him. And then I sent him my New York Times best-selling books, and I showed it to him, and I sent it to him and Lori. And you're like, oh my God, you know, and I said, you were the little spark that got me, you know, trajectorying in a different direction. Yeah, it really is amazing. You know, I always say one man, you know, one question, one answer changed the trajectory of my life. And it's like, sometimes, like, I don't even know, like, I know I said yes because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew that it was getting more and more dangerous because now I'm 19. I'm not a minor anymore. It just seemed like, okay, you know, I didn't believe in me, but I believed in him. So I had to put my trust there that he could guide me. And he was guiding a whole bunch of us real estate agents and telling us exactly what to do. When you get in, you do this. When, you know, by lunchtime, you have to have this done. By 5 o'clock, you have to have this done. And he gave me structure for success for real estate.
That's amazing. What was the quote that you said about identity and destiny? Can you say that again?
Yeah, you have to upgrade your identity, right? Who you believe you are and who you show up as to match the destiny. And like in the language you and I love, is the success that you and I want is a different frequency than, you know, the success frequency we're in right now, whether it's health, wealth, relationships, career, business. And so he said, if you keep thinking, you know, at this level and feeling at this level and acting at this level, of course, these are going to be the results. So I had to create, which I now understand better, a vibratory match, a frequency match, you know, with what it is that I wanted to experience, have, be, achieve in my life. And at the time, it was all money related, right? Because getting into real estate, make money, that was really my only, the girls and money, right? I remember Napoleon Hill, in his book, said, you become what you think about most. And I went to Bob Proctor and I said, am I going to become a woman? But the identity part was elevating, from who I thought I was to embodying this new, more empowered version of myself, even though I didn't believe it to be true initially. By practicing it, back then I started to visualize. I knew about visualization because I played basketball, I played hockey, and all of our coaches said, visualize the free throw, visualize the points you want to score, visualize winning the game. And I go, okay, close your eyes. Now feel it. Feel like you actually want it. So I learned some of those techniques, and I learned, the affirmations, and I wrote out my affirmations, and I recorded my affirmations, and I listened to my affirmations. And before I knew it, I was speaking like those affirmations. So I knew it worked. And I remember in like the first 30 days in the office, there was myself, Vern Harnish, Leo Ng, Arthur Chan, and this other guy, Dave. And we would sit there, and some of them like, F, what the fuck are we doing this for? And I remember, let's say I was doing affirmations or visualizations of this thing that wasn't true. Now, so grateful and happy that I'm earning 10 grand a month. That was my first goal. I'm now so happy and grateful that I'm driving my Cadillac sedan. At 19, I wanted a Cadillac sedan DeVille, which I ended up getting was looked like a 45-year-old. Some people thought I was driving my dad's car. And I remember this voice in my head would go, bullshit, that's not true. And one day I asked Mr. Brown, I said, what do I do with that voice that keeps saying bullshit? That's not true. You're a liar. He says, just don't believe your thoughts. It's just a thought coming up. And maybe you don't feel like it's true right now, but even a lie could become the truth if you repeat it often enough. But with affirmations, he said, you're affirming something that you want in your mind. So it just said, well, maybe it's not true right now, but this is what I'm affirming to be true. And so he helped me understand those, what our friend Dr. Daniel Amen says, the automatic negative thoughts are normal. What to do with those automatic negative thoughts is the skill you learn to turn them into automatic positive thoughts. Automatic negative emotions, turn them into automatic positive emotions, because we're not our thoughts, we're not our emotions. So I learned these little skills early on, for mental and emotional, control. And because I played basketball, I understood the concept of practice, but not, any type of practice, perfect practice. So I got some very good training from my coaches in basketball and hockey, but then in sales and building a business from Alan Brown was the beginning of the spark of, okay, I'm starting to get interested in this. And then there's a very negative, or what seemed to be a negative side, several years later, that really helped me understand the power of the mind, which we can talk about afterwards.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. And I think this is where I want to really dive even deeper in the conversation, because I would love to talk about not only just the power of manifestation, the power of what's the latest technology for reprogramming the mind, but then also talking about how psychedelics helps with neuroplasticity and accelerating that. And I totally agree that identity is the source of everything. I remember, I've heard you quote Maxwell Maltz before, but I remember in Psychocybernetics him saying this idea that you can never outperform your self-image. And that idea just really stuck with me, because there were so many areas where I was working and pushing and striving so hard, but I didn't realize that my self-image was the limiting factor. And so I would love to just dig into, I love your mind is geared towards the science, but also is open to the mystical, right? I think I
started off with the mystical. I didn't start off with the science. One of my early teachers around this law of attraction was Bob Proctor, and he was telling me about, the law of attraction. And I just loved what he taught me, back in the early 90s is when I met him. And then I funded the Life Success Institute to be his partner and bring those teachings of energy, vibration, frequency to the world, because it made sense to me, because I do have a bit of a science mind, biology mind, and chemistry mind. So I like to understand how things are put together, the mechanics of stuff I like. And so I was fascinated, by the universe. I mean, I just in awe of creation, just in awe of this trillion dollar, sentient being called a human, and organs that make this body not who I am, of course, and John's not who I am. Those are my body and my name. But I've studied the spiritual practices from my early 20s. I became very fascinated with reality. And I remember Bob Proctor was the first guy that talked to me about, the hear, see, smell, taste, and touch sense. But they're very limited, right? We only hear up to 25, 30 decibels per second. Bats hear at 85,000 decibels per second. So I was very interested in sound waves, radio waves, the element table, and I was just fascinated with life, and the intelligence that is in me and is in everybody else and is me and you. How did this get created? Just fascinated with it. And quickly realized that, the physical realm is just one part of the equation. And obviously the discussion we've had before on psychedelics, is the magnifiers and the gateways, into different dimensions of space and time. And so I've been an explorer. I've been an explorer for 45 years of consciousness and practices, and just seeking to understand me better, which then helps me understand you better and everybody else a little bit better. And I'm still the beginner, just a student on the journey.
I love that idea that we're all just beginners. We're all just beginning to get a peek of who we are and how powerful we are. And I love the idea of experiencing the world and ourselves and everything through frequency, and just thinking of how small the frequency is that our physical ears can hear. Also just thinking how tiny our spiritual frequency is in terms of what we're actually able to consciously receive. I think of oftentimes psychedelics as just tools to expand our capacity to receive frequency. I would love to give me an insight to when you first really discovered the power of psychedelics in terms of, because I know you probably experienced drugs when you were young, but in terms of really experiencing the power of transformational psychedelic usage. What was that journey like, and what did you discover, and how did that amplify the other work that you were doing?
Yeah. So the only psychedelic I tried in my teens and 20s, tried mushrooms once, psilocybin. I was in Bali and I was with a group of surfers and friends, and recreationally, they said, let's do some mushrooms. I said, yeah, sure, let's do some mushrooms. And I was willing to experiment. And unfortunately, or fortunately, my journey was 24 hours long and I could not get off the journey. And I did not try it again. We went to a mushroom restaurant. I had mushroom soup and a mushroom omelet. So I clearly had too much. Nobody guided me how much I should have taken. So stupid mistake. But I did not try any type of psychedelics. And I've never been a pot smoker, or Montreal had, hash was big there. I didn't try psychedelics until probably 15 years ago. So in my late 40s, I decided I'd done enough research on the brain. Psychedelics were making a bit of I shouldn't say a comeback, but a resurgence of people that were experimenting with it again, probably 15 years ago. And there were some studies that were being done, and I was fascinated with what we were learning about the networks in the brain and the circuits in the brain. And so I don't know why I did this, but I was reading a lot about DMT, 5-MeO. And that was my first time back, first time doing a psychedelic. And holy shit, was that an indoctrination into totally, fragmenting my entire physical existence and having 1 billion years of experience in 20 minutes.
Every time I try to describe 5-MeO DMT, I just say, just imagine that you plop your soul into the world's most giant slingshot. You pull back and you just launch your soul straight to the center of the known galaxy where time and space don't exist at all. You exist there for a couple million decades, and then all of a sudden you come back to your body. You're like, and 5-10 minutes has passed,
It's interesting because I've always liked cosmology, and I've been fascinated with the size of this thing, right? And I'm at my home in Telluride right now. And many years ago, I was on the gondola, and there was this comet streaking through the sky. I mean, just ripping through the sky. And it looked like it was about this big in the sky, looking out of the gondola, perfectly clear sky. And it was Hale Bob. I don't know if you remember Hale Bob. The Branch Davidians in Rancho Santa Fe, California, thought they were going to catch this comet and that was going to save their lives. They killed themselves. Well, that little streak in the sky was 200 million miles long.
Whoa.
I'm like, holy fuck. I'm looking at the whole sky, and this piece that I just witnessed streak through the sky is 200 million miles. So I go, so that's like 1 billion miles? That's 2 billion? How big is this thing? So DMT5-MeO. I went in with the intention of God, a universal intelligence. Show me how big this thing is. When people ask me, what was it like? I said, imagine that God holds you in a slingshot and pulls you to the edge of the universe. He says, ready? And before you can answer, you go, and you go, and I became light. I was the Big Bang. And I was streaking through the cosmos, not just this galaxy, but all galaxies at light speed. And I kept going to like, and I would get like to the edge of that. I go, that big? It's that fucking big? That's what I was doing during the journey. The shamans were, I just kept going, that big? And I was like, oh my God, and I just had the most spectacular first journey with psychedelics. So we did 2 or 3 journeys that night, and I had several of the most beautiful, profound knowings. You know, it's not, I read a lot, I watch a lot, I learn a lot, but this was a visceral knowing that there isn't anybody on this planet that can take away what I learned. It took me 1 year to synthesize everything that I experienced in that journey that night. And I didn't do anything else for a year. I just like sat with, okay, but I did a lot of research. Now I did a lot of research. Where was this coming from? So that was kind of like my beginning back into that. And then I have experimented, journeyed, experienced psilocybin a variety of different times, ayahuasca a variety of different times, ketamine. Last several years, I've really experimented with ketamine quite a bit. And just every time, it's just this deep well of wisdom and insight. It's probably the thing that I feel is the most truthful thing I know. It's so profound during the experiences. And there have been some very challenging moments in the experience, but I've learned how to navigate through those and accept those and move into them. That's part of the practice, right? Because it's not always like, wow, look how big the universe is and look how beautiful I feel and look at the love that I feel. But the essence of the knowledge from the well of limitless supply has just been life-changing for me. By the way, I want to digress for a moment. After I did my first, DMT journey that I just told you about, the first thought that I had after, like I came, back to this physicalness is, when can I do this with my sons? I'm anti-drugs now for recreation, for me. My kids use drugs, and like I use drugs, but the spiritual experience, the first thought I had, when can I share this with my sons? They were like 12 and 13 at the time. It took about 12 years before that happened. But the first thought I had, it was so spectacular. I wanted them to experience it because I love them so much.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I love that. And, everything with this show and what we're doing, our work is really helping encourage like the really responsible, intentional use of these entheogenic substances and really giving people some protocols to make it so it's transformational and not, I think that there's a use and time for recreational, taking Molly and going dancing, or there's times for, the playful side. But for us, this is really about how to access these higher states of consciousness so that we can bring ourselves more fully to our purpose, our work, and to our families and to those that we care about. And so I would love for you, with all your background and neuroscience and health and transformation, like how do you stack these substances like psilocybin or some of these other substances, ketamine or whatever it is, to create a protocol for transformation, a protocol to reprogram your mind, helping, access the neuroplasticity of the substances in an intentional way that it makes a difference in your real world.
Yeah. So first and foremost, all the research and the science and the fMRI studies, functional magnetic resonance imaging studies, show that it activates what's known as the neuroplasticity switch. When we're born, this neuroplasticity switch is on. By the time we're 12, 13, it goes mostly to off. If you wonder why is a baby so tired all the time, it's because it's creating these neural connections, these patterns. We're born with about 100 billion brain cells. These brain cells prune to about 85 million, and those cells are making these connections, smell, taste, sound, texture, mother's breast, father's hairy face. We're creating these neural networks like at lightning speeds when we're born. But then it turns off, and then we have to deliberately turn it back on. And so we know that when you're using, the different forms of medicines in a safe way, I'm going to say, you don't want to do it unsafely, do it in a safe way, in a controlled environment with somebody who knows what the heck they're doing in case things go sideways, which sometimes they do. We know that the neuroplasticity switch goes on, and we know that it creates very fast neural pathways. And if after the ceremonies or journeys, you have an opportunity to integrate what you learned, with new distinctions, new awarenesses, new beliefs maybe of what's possible. Like I've experienced, I'm sure you have, and maybe a lot of the people that are watching, I've experienced some very profound shifts in my awareness that I have taken to my day-to-day life. And I've also asked myself, whenever I've done these journeys, I journal, I write as much as I can. What were the lessons? What did I learn? What do I need to go deeper on? What do I need to explore? So I give myself almost like an instruction manual from that to say, okay, how will I integrate what I learned? I still have a holding company called Praxis International. Praxis means how do you integrate your beliefs with your behavior? Right? So now that I have this profound new awareness, how do I start living from that place? How do I start acting from that place? How do I start using the lessons, and really live my life from that place? If I believe, which I do, if I believe that I am accessing a source of knowledge and information from the well of all supply. And so I always suggest to people, how will you use what you discover? How will you release and let go of what you've been shown it's time to let go, and how? But how do you create an integration, with all of this newfound experience? So, a lot of people do these journeys, but then nothing really changes. And so my question for you is, not for you, but just when I share with my kids or anybody else, friends of mine, is make sure that you consciously create, a path to reinforce whatever it is that your newfound wisdom is bringing forth to you.
So in terms of a practical protocol, say someone is going to create a journey where they drop in with psilocybin or one of these other really intentional substances, they're managing their set and setting to make sure that they're in the right place and they're doing this very intentionally. They have a really extraordinary journey. Actually, I would love, just because I know that you have some specific things you do in journey space to help, while your brain's in that neuroplastic state, what are some intentional ways you use in journey space to program your mind? And then let's talk about what very clear integration strategies might be for someone that just really wants to make sure that it's not just a cool experience, but it's something that really shapes how they show up or shapes their identity moving forward.
So I think I believe that self-talk is one of the first places you have to start to shift yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I've been a fan of properly written affirmations in first person or third person. And, I created a whole body of work around inner sizes is what I call them. And so sometimes I will have my own inner sizes that I've created for myself that are recorded in my voice. I will drop those into my journey so that my brain just reinforces that, because I know I'm accessing my subconscious mind and the superconscious mind right there. So sometimes I'll have music and then I'll have my inner sizes with that. A lot of times, almost every time, I have a notepad that I will write when I can write. Sometimes I can't write. I'll have a recorder, and if I can speak, I will speak. But in any case, at the end of the journey where I've come back and to integrate, and most of my journeys have been with people except for ketamine use, where I could just journal on my own and write on my own, record on my own. But you know how people get together after maybe a ceremony and they talk, what was your experience like? Don't leave it to chance, because now we're back into this conscious, awareness, and we forget, right? Because now we're activating, that hippocampus part of our brain, and we need to get it into the cerebellum, part of the subconscious patterns. So I like to write things down, reinforce stuff, and then review it on an ongoing basis, review it. A lot of times I will take what I wrote down, then I'll record it, then I will listen to it to remind myself, of what I experienced. And that just opens up the connection between this conscious practice that I have and this subconscious pattern. So a lot of times when you're programming or conditioning the subconscious mind, you're not even aware that the change has happened. But you notice behavioral change down the road, and you notice results have gotten different. So I like to make the subconscious conscious and have a subconscious pattern integration for that. And since I'm doing a lot of my own programming or reprogramming, then I like to be very highly aware to be very deliberate. I'm very deliberate. I trust the universe, but then I like to reinforce deliberately and create these reinforcement patterns. I'm going to go back to when I was playing sports as a kid. It was like practice. That's what becomes, unconscious competence. And I like to be conscious of my unconscious competencies. The other thing that I like to do is I use a 100-day rule. So I know we can reprogram the subconscious mind like that. But I also know that programming, unless it's reinforced, can dissipate. And those neural patterns aren't going to be as strong. And we know that it takes 66 days to 365 days to rewire the subconscious based on some of the research that's done. NASA did a study, can't remember what year, like many years ago. I'm going to say 20, 25 years ago, where they put these convex glasses on the astronauts. And the convex glasses flipped the astronauts' life upside down. And I can't remember the number of, I used to teach this when I got into this, but within, let's say, a week or 10 days, many people may know this, may not, but, we're not actually seeing the world, right side up. Our brain's taking the world, it's actually upside down, and it's turning it right side up. Well, these convex glasses flipped it back to how our brain naturally perceives it, but their brains were wired, to see things right side up from birth. And it took about a week, and you could do some research on NASA convex glasses study, and their lives turned right back upside down again. So they wanted to understand how long it takes for the brain to rewire itself with convex glasses where everything is upside down. And so that was a fairly interesting study. So back to the protocols, I like to reinforce whatever it is that I'm learning over a period of 100 days. When I look to make any change, I give myself a 100-day, protocol. Give you an example. Every year I do something to challenge my brain and my habits for 100 days. 3 years ago, I started brushing my teeth with my left hand, and I could see my right hand grabbing the toothbrush. Like I could see it because this was more comfortable. I go, no. Boom. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. I've been brushing my teeth now for over 1,500 days. This hand doesn't go up to pick it up anymore. Sometimes when I pick up my toothbrush with my right hand now, my left hand just grabs it out of my right hand because the pattern is this is dominant now. I'm right-handed. I did it because this is my less dominant hand. At the end of this year, I said 100 days, no social media. 100 days, no news on TV. And then I also, to add a little bit of extra challenge for myself, I said 1 full year without refined sugar. And I love cookies and cakes and pies, but 1 year. So I just challenged myself to control my own mindset, but using some of the neuroscience stuff that I know with how long it takes to reinforce a pattern, I like to reinforce the conscious patterns and the subconscious patterns with 100 days of awareness and deliberate reinforcement.
I love hearing that. And by the way, anyone that's watching this, if you have not yet gotten John's book or read Inner Size, it's such a phenomenal handbook for understanding how to reprogram the subconscious. Like I love that book. I've been through it many times, and I really actually value this conversation because I mean, I have background in hypnosis and NLP and all these different like tools for helping people accelerate change, but I've never intentionally recorded my own hypnosis audios or my own affirmations and listened to it in journey space. And I really appreciate that because I noticed that there's some things that I'm like wanting to change right now, but there's some stickiness. And I've realized I have these old, like really rooted limiting beliefs and stuff like that have been like holding me back. And so now this has given me like the awareness to like really attack it with the full arsenal of my skills and record some new affirmations and record some new journey.
I'll give you access, if I haven't already, to my Inner Size app. There's 500 inner sizes to retrain your brain.
Thank you so much. And as we wrap up right now, is there any final, I guess, invitations that you have for the people that have spent this time with us? Anything that you want to offer as a gift or encouragement or next steps?
So I think the first thing is to sit back for, just, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and go back in time. Okay, not just back in time to the time you were born, but before you were born, your mother and father, got together, and through this beautiful act of love or sex, intimacy, and the X and Y chromosome, got together and formulated, that early zygote that multiplied 26 times. If you just keep going back before those moments, one of the things that you're going to have to get to or will get to is that the history of our species is in the cells that you have right now. Not only do you have the heritage and lineage of your mother and father and grandfather and grandmother, but if you just go all the way back in time and you think of the intelligence required for that to be, and for you to be here right now, and then you realize that every time you take in a breath, you're breathing 10 to the 22nd power of air, which is made up of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon, that for the most part came from the furnace of a star that exploded. And you and I are breathing in and out, these elements, right? These bits of energy that has coalesced into making you, making me. And it's like, I'm getting chills as I'm thinking about, like, you cannot think of that and feel less than when you realize what it has taken and takes for you to be here as unique as you are. Then say, okay, then how come I have these disempowering beliefs? How come I have this maybe less than ideal image of myself? How come I have a fear of this, but she doesn't or he doesn't? Well, now let's get into understanding a little bit about this multi-billion-dollar organ, which I prefer to call as an organism, called the brain. Right? In the brain, you weren't born with any beliefs. You weren't born with any self-image. You weren't born with any self-worth or self-esteem. You weren't born with any skills. Maybe the only, automatic skill you had was to suck on a nipple or on a bottle to get some milk, and you had that suckling, predetermined part of your autonomic nervous system, and you breathe automatically, and you digest automatically, and you shit automatically. Great. But everything else were just patterns that, were created and reinforced. And so if we take that we were born genius with unlimited potential, but then because of my parents, your parents, the school I went to, you went to, my sisters, my brothers, my friends, my own experiences, and the meanings that, I learned to give things, I just became conditioned. What if I just said, I am still a genius and I am just going to retrain my brain. I'm going to rewire my brain, and I'm going to actively use whether it's affirmations or medicine. Okay, you go the whole spectrum. Affirmations, visualizations, mental contrasting, cognitive behavior therapy, NLP, hypnosis, whatever you want to use. These are just tools to put you back in control, right? To reclaim your genius. Because it's there. And so the question now becomes is, do you want to activate what's already there within you? And then are you going to do it alone? Are you going to get help? or you're going to get somebody to like do it for you, which they really can't. They can do it with you, but not for you, or you're not going to do it. And if you're not going to do it, then just say, let me not complain anymore about how my life is, because I'm going to settle, and I'm just going to call myself a settler, and that's going to be my identity. But if you're not going to be a settler, then you say, great, then what is my path, to bringing forth the best version of me? That's all, just the best version of me. Not compared to her, not compared to him, just what I feel could be a better version of me, and work towards that. Because that's the game that we all have here, right? And if we could just get on that path to do it safely, securely, lovingly, kindly, with ourselves, with compassion and empathy, and be around the environment of people who are also working on themselves so we can lift each other up as we climb, we can all do it. We can all be the best version of ourselves, or whatever that's supposed to be. And so I just invite everybody to keep doing what you're doing, because you're here watching or listening to us right now. You've got a phenomenal mentor that you're, paying attention to, and learn with him and study with him and share with him and give to him and give to the others in the community. And just get on the journey, get on the journey, and you can go as fast or as slow as you want. Totally up to you.
I love all of that, John. It's such an honor to spend time with you. Such a gift you are to the planet and to my life personally. I'm just going to speak personally. You've made such an impact in my life, in all of your work and everything you're creating. And for anyone that's been watching this, listening to this, please tune more into the work that John's up to, and get his books. Like, he's got so much content out there that will just blow your mind and change your life. So yeah, really immerse yourself in that. And any final words?
How about I love you? Just whoever needed to hear that, I love you too.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And just a final invitation for anyone, if you want to go deeper with any of these conversations, if you want to plug into the community and the tribe that we're building with Psychedelic Sex and the Superconscious, just go to pss.com. Once again, we were going to do Psychedelic Sex and the Superconscious.com, but we realized no one knows how to spell that. So if you go to pssshow.com, you can access all of the tribe gifts and bonus and really plug into this community and be part of some of the amazing events we have coming up. So with that, thanks, John, and thank you, everyone. Just remember, this is your life, so make it legendary.
Thank you, legendary explorers, for joining us on this cosmic journey today.
Your curiosity fuels our exploration of psychedelics, sex, and the superconscious.
If you're hungry for more, dive into our website and connect with us on social media. All the links are in the show notes.
And stay tuned for our next mind-expanding episode. We can't wait to talk to you again in our next adventure.
Until then, remember, this is your life. So,
make it legendary.